In this part of the lesson about cookies and session tracking, I'm going to talk about an example of using cookies. In this example, I will show you how to use cookie in a web application, and uh, in this example, we implement a very simple web application which is called guestbook. So what is guestbook? A guestbook is a table with several columns. Here we have three columns, the ID, the name, and the message column. And the message column contains the message from guest. So this guestbook or this table allows guests to leave message into the table. And I will demo the feature called add comment. The add comment feature allows the user to add a new message or new comment into this table or this guestbook, and the new message will be added into this table at the bottom of the table. And I will show you the two ways of implement this function. In the first way, I use cookie. In the first way, I didn't use cookie, and in the second way, we use cookie to implement this function. And you try to observe to see the differences between the two cases, and try to explain the mechanism that creates the differences. So now let's see the demo. Okay, so here is the guestbook application, and we run this application. So run as and run on server. So here we have the table which is called guestbook, and at the beginning this table already has two messages from two guests. So now we will perform add a comment or a message to this guestbook. So now I suppose I add a message from me. Okay, add. So as you can see, the new message is added into this table at the bottom of the table. And in the case I want to add another message, then I click the then I click this link again, and it will bring the form and let me fill in the information for the new message again, and I have to type my name again. So the second message, right? So if I want to add the third message, then I have to type my name again the third time, the third message. So as you can see, in the case guests want to leave many messages into this guestbook, he or she has to type his or her name many times, right? And this is quite inconvenient because we don't need to type the same information, which is the name, many times. So uh, I can avoid this uh, inconvenience by using cookie to implement the add comment feature in another way. So here, for example, I add a new comment or new message from another guest. For example, the guest's name is Mr. Home, for example, and the first message from Home and add. So the message is added to this position. So now I suppose that Mr. Home want to add another message into this guestbook, and then he click add comment. Then as you can see here, the name of the guest is already there, right? So Mr. Home doesn't have to type his name again. Okay, in this case, and he just need to type the message. Okay, the second message. So you can see the second way which use the cookie to implement the add common features is more convenient than the first way, right? And how can we do this? Okay, in order to do this, we need to have several servlets. Actually, we need to have three servlets: the add common servlet, the guestbook servlets, and the add common with cookies servlet. And we need to have one more class called guestbook entries. And the main purpose of this class is to contain the information for each entry of the guestbook. So you remember that in the guestbook we have a table with 3 columns, and this class will have three fields, and each field in this class is corresponding to each column of the table in the guestbook. Okay, you remember that in this class we need to have a constructor, and we need to have a getter and setter for each field. So here we have the getter for the ID field and the setter for the ID field, and similarly we have a getter and setter for the name field, and getter and the setter for the message field. So this is the guestbook entry. Okay, so for the guestbook servlet, okay, so the guestbook servlet is responsible for creating this table. Okay, so in order to create that table, okay, we implement the doGet method, and we use the table tab, and we declare 3 columns: the ID column, the name column, and the message column, and etc. And this is quite familiar with you. So that's the guestbook servlet, and the add common servlet and the add common with cookies servlet. I don't want to show the complete code because I want you to implement them by yourself. So here I just summarize the main points to implement those classes or those servlets. For the add comment with cookie servlets, okay, you need to have a do get method, and the main purpose of this method is to show the form for user to enter the information for the guestbook. You remember that when we run this application, and you remember that in order to to leave a message into the guestbook, the user need to fill in the information into a form. So this is the form, and the code to create that form is like this. Okay, you use you use form tag. You use form tag to create this form, and you use input type text to create this edit text. Okay, and you use text area to create this control, right? And you use the input type submit to create this button. So this is the code in the doGet method to create the form for user to entering the message and the name for the guestbook. And the code of the doGet method in the add comment servlet is similar to this method of the add comment with cookie servlet. So now we move to the code for the do post method of the add comment with cookie. Okay, so here we use cookie, and in order to create a cookie in the server, okay, we use the add cookie method of the add cookie method of the response object. And in order to create a cookie, we declare a variable which is a variable of cookie class, and we use new cookie, and we pass the two parameter to this constructor. And the first parameter is the name of the attribute of the cookie. Okay, so here is the name of the attribute of the cookie. So this cookie has a attribute called name. Okay, and here is the value of this attribute. So the name of the name attribute is this parameter. And here we use the response send redirect to redirect the user to the guestbook after finishing entering the information to the entry form. Okay, so once the user fill in this form and press this button, then this code will handle that, and after finish handling, the code will redirect the user to the guestbook. So here after finishing fill in the information, for example message, then press this button, then the servlet, okay, so this code will handle that and send it direct to the guestbook servlet. So send redirect to guestbook here. And here we use the get name function, and the code inside this function is like this. And remember that here we use the get cookie in order to get the cookies from the browser. And in the case that the browser hasn't had the cookie yet, then this method return null. And in the case this method return null, which is here, then we get the name of the gets from the request. Okay, and we create a new cookie and pass the name of the guest into the name attribute of the cookie. And in the case that the browser already store the cookie, then this method will return the cookies stored in the browser. Then this variable will be different from null. So in that case, we get the cookie with attribute name, and we get the value of the name attribute, and we return the name. And in the case that the name is different from null, then this part of the code is skipped. Then the flow of code will run to this section, and the name will be passed to this constructor of the guestbook entry, and we create a new entry with the name and the message and the ID. Notice that the ID of the name are automatically increased. So after that, we store the new entry to the servlet context. Here I would like to explain what is servlet context. A servlet context is the memory. Okay, you can imagine that this is the global memory for the web application, and every information stored in this memory can be accessed by every servlet. And here we call the get servlet context. Then this method will return the servlet context, and the servlet context has a method called get attribute, and this method will return the attribute with this name. So remember that in the beginning, the guestbook already has two messages from two guests, and we initially create those two messages and two guests inside the init method of the guestbook servlet, and we add the two entries to the servlet context by using the set attribute. So servlet context has two important methods, and those are set attribute and get attribute. And here we call the method set attribute to store the entry list, which contain the two entries here. So we store the entry list into the attribute name entries, and these attributes stay inside the servlet context. Okay, and here after create the new entry for the name and the message, we call the method getAttribute, and this is the method from the servlet context which returns the attribute name entries. So after perform this line, we will get the entry list. Okay, at the moment this entry list contains the two entries here. Okay, the two entry here, and after we get the entry list from the servlet context, we perform the add method and pass the entry here to this list. So after run this line, this list will increase one more entry. So now this list will have three entries, right? Because at the beginning it has two entries. Now we add one more, so we have three entries in this list, right? So after adding the new entry to the attribute entries in the servlet context, then we send it direct to the guestbook servlet. Okay. In the case that we don't use cookie, so the code is very simple. In the case that we don't use cookie, then the code is very simple. In the case that we don't use cookie, then the code for add comment is very simple, like this. Okay, for your convenience, I would like to put the two versions of do post of the two classes. This one is the do post of the add comment with cookie, and this one is the do post of add comment without using cookie, and you can see the difference between the codes. And you remember that this is the get name function, which is used in the do post method of the add comment with cookie servlet. So those are the main points to create this example of using cookie to implement a very simple guestbook. So that's all for this part of the lesson about cookies and session tracking.